These games prove that you don't need a AAA budget to create a masterpiece. Hey everyone, I'm Ricky with WatchMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 times smaller studios put AAA studios to shame.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
For this list, we'll be going over the instances when games created by smaller studios outshine the AAA titles that inspired them. Let's get to number 10. Number 10. AM2R, Metroid: Samus Returns. The Metroid franchise has, like its gameplay, been a somewhat stark series, with minimal releases compared to other big Nintendo franchises. This hasn't stopped fans from wanting more though, and after Metroid Zero Mission remade the first Metroid game, fans took it upon themselves to remake the second when Nintendo didn't, at least for many years. The aptly titled AM2R, or Another Metroid 2 Remake, updates the classic Game Boy using Zero Mission sprites, as well as new areas and enemies, and a whole host of other features. Nintendo released their own remake, finally, the next year, after taking down this fan game. But while its new combat system was interesting, many people feel that AM2R, made by a single programmer, Milton Guasti, outperformed Samus Returns. Number 9. War for the Overworld, Dungeon Keeper.
This room produces scores of micro-piglets, a delicacy that will sustain the weak flesh of your minions by filling their bellies with succulent pig flesh.
The Dungeon Keeper series is an RTS franchise which flips the script on the standard hero searches for loot narrative by having the players play as the monsters managing a dungeon in order to kill said hero. Unfortunately, EA's treatment of the series has been disappointing to say the least, especially after the controversial freemium mobile version.
Loot and destroy other players' dungeons.
Enter Bright Rock Games, whose title War for the Overworld was initially created to be a fan-made sequel to the series, but eventually became a standalone release with explicit references to Dungeon Keeper removed. Despite the lack of connection to the original franchise, War for the Overworld certainly bears a strong resemblance to the games that inspired it, and doesn't charge you an arm and a leg.
Once minions are rested, you can leave them to their work or force them to train by dropping them in a barracks.
Number 8. Divinity Original Sin, Dragon Age Inquisition.
Oh, hail the rain spirit. That was a fine display of magicianship it was.
Dragon Age Inquisition by BioWare was released to critical and financial success, but it also received a fair amount of criticism for the ways in which combat and story diverted from norms in prior Dragon Age games. Some franchise fans felt that Inquisition was a downgrade on both fronts.
The demon is vulnerable, now!
Meanwhile, Divinity Original Sin, a partially crowdfunded game released the same year, developed by Larian Studios, has been cited as bearing more of a resemblance to Dragon Age than Inquisition does. It's arguably more challenging, boasts better combat and more freedom in terms of how to play, and came packaged with a slick editor. To ultimately seal this shame, Larian Studios is now developing Baldur's Gate 3, a series whose first two titles were developed by BioWare and was the inspiration for Dragon Age to begin with. Oh, the irony.
Got ourselves competition already. That's our ship.
Number 7. Sonic Mania, Sonic Games by Sonic Team. The Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has been dragged through the mud for years in the court of public opinion, mainly because Sonic Team's work for the last few decades have ranged from decent to legendarily bad.
I'm sorry, but can you take her to a safe place?
Then, longtime Sonic superfan Christian Whitehead and his studio Headcanon released Sonic Mania, taking things back to the basics with Genesis-era 2D gameplay, while also bringing in new levels and mechanics that made fans love Sonic in the first place. Sure, it was published by Sega, but aside from Sonic Boom, it was also the first major Sonic release not to be released by Sonic Team. Sometimes, the old guard isn't always the best hands for classic franchises. Number 6. A Hat in Time, Banjo Kazooie. 3D collectathon platformers like Banjo Kazooie dominated the late 90s and early 2000s, but fell by the wayside mostly because Microsoft didn't develop any new 3D platformers once they bought Rare, under the pretense that, quote, no one wanted 3D platformers anymore. While Yooka-Laylee by former Rare alumni studios Playtonic Games was a great attempt at a spiritual sequel, we would argue that A Hat in Time managed to do it better and on 1/6 of the budget. Developer Gears for Breakfast recaptured the magic of 3D platformers of the era with tons of collectibles, costumes and abilities, and an incredibly charming atmosphere. It's not as revolutionary as some of the recent AAA 3D platformers, but it's still a wonderful throwback that certainly helped prove Microsoft wrong. Number 5. Undertale, Earthbound/Mother series. Earthbound, also known as the Mother series in Japan, has had a troubled history outside of its native country, mostly due to Nintendo refusing to market their quirky RPG series or import 2 of its 3 games for many years. However, Undertale, a kickstarted indie game which takes many cues from Mother, particularly with its music and offbeat characters, has proven to be a global phenomenon, and it was all done by one guy, Toby Fox. Undertale's morality and battle systems, as well as its engaging and replayable narrative, have made it an enduring hit and one of the greatest indie game successes in recent memory. See what happens when you don't give us Mother 3, Nintendo? Number 4. Cities, Skylines, SimCity. Fans of City Simulator series SimCity were massively disappointed by EA Maxis' 2013 release, which had a notoriously disastrous launch due to overloaded servers caused by the game forcing players to play online. The number of downgrades compared to previous games, like the city size limit, didn't help much either. But 2 years later, Finnish developer Colossal Order released Cities Skylines, which, although an unrelated franchise, managed to feel more like the modern SimCity game players had all been waiting for, thanks to its massive city sizes and support for user-created content. At the time of its release, it rightfully took SimCity's old crown as the premier city-building game. Number 3. The Outer Worlds, Fallout franchise. The Fallout franchise is known for its expansive action RPG worlds and quirky aesthetics, at least once Bethesda took over. However, many feel that Obsidian Entertainment managed to beat Bethesda at their own game, almost literally, with Fallout New Vegas, and it looks like the same holds true for their original title, The Outer Worlds, given that Fallout's original creators directed it. Set in a retro-futuristic space colony full of biting commentary on capitalism, The Outer Worlds ups the ante from Fallout games with features like multiple planets, branching narratives, and more streamlined character creation.
Wonder if I left the microwave running.
Number 2. Bloodstained Games, Castlevania franchise. Castlevania is one of gaming's most beloved and long-running franchises. It's just too bad that publisher Konami seems to be determined to ignore the series and many of their other IPs. Since the departure of producer Koji Igarashi, Konami has made a handful of new Castlevania games, and not particularly well-received ones. Thankfully, Igarashi has returned with a few games inspired by classic Castlevania. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon takes its cues from the NES era of the series, specifically Castlevania III, Dracula's Curse. Meanwhile, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is more in line with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And any game with flying pigs in it is a winner in our book. Want more video game content? Check out our gaming channel Mojo Plays and discover games and ideas you never knew existed. with more lists, breakdowns, in our latest series, Arcade Roulette.
Justin and John are in.
Oh.
Hey, is that Porky Pig? There's a lot of things being ripped off in this game.
Number 1, Stardew Valley, Harvest Moon, Story of Seasons franchise. Oh, I have put in so many hours into this game. It is absolutely phenomenal. Okay, for 20 years, the biggest name in farming and life simulator video games was Harvest Moon, or Story of Seasons after the developer and publisher split ties. But as the series went on, it deviated further and further from its original charm. Thankfully, Stardew Valley, an indie game developed by a single individual, managed to re-sow what we thought was a fallow field. Stardew Valley streamlines the farming process, gives the players more romance options, including same-sex love interests, and lets you dungeon crawl among a wide variety of other activities, all delivered in a charming SNES style. The game practically made the series that inspired it obsolete. Stardew Valley coming in at number 1. I have spent more time in that game than I care to admit. But all of these games are definitely worth your time. You will not be disappointed. Alright everyone, as always, thank you for stopping by. Please, let me know down in the comments which of these games are your favorite and why. Maybe check out this video over here, and I'll see you next time.